Coming up next on Tech News Weekly, Aunt Pruitt and I have a conversation about this week's tech news. That's right. It's a change to things, and we can thank PG&E. We love you.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech... This is Tech News Weekly, episode 103, recorded Friday, October 11th, 2019.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Microsoft Mechanics, the official show for Microsoft for tech enthusiasts, IT pros, and software architects. Get deep dives from the engineers behind the tech, or just learn the essentials of the latest from Microsoft. Visit aka.ms/TNW Mechanics to watch and subscribe today.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly. If you couldn't tell, things are a little bit different today. Of course, this is the show where normally we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news, but we're going to do things a little differently this episode. I am Mikah Sargent.
And I am Aunt Pruitt.
Hello, Aunt, and welcome. Well, I guess it's a welcome from me to you. You hung out with Jason last time, and that was an
I've had
excellent
enough
episode.
of Mr. Howell, so it's now your turn.
Well, thank you. So I assume that many of you have heard about the recent power outages in our area, and they just really kind of threw a wrench or
Wait a minute, power outages?
a banana into the works. I do want to go ahead and show you, Aunt. I have since repaired the banana that you broke last episode.
I did not mean to break it. I'm sorry.
All is well again. Well, it isn't your fault. Jason was like, yeah, these stretch. And then you were like, no, not this one. So it's all good. It's all well. And everything's fine. It's the cannons, exactly. So we're doing the episode a little bit differently. Aunt and I thought instead of trying to make sure that we could have people out there on call like every possible 30 minutes of any given day, you and I could just talk about the news
all of the
this
different
week.
time zones across the planet.
Yeah. No Hawaii mountain time today, folks. We're not doing that. I thought we'd kick things off with, you heard about Facebook's Libra currency, right?
Yes, I have, and I thought it was just a pie in the sky kind of thing.
Yeah,
Does
something.
This thing even exist?
So a while back now, Facebook announced this cryptocurrency, and it was sort of another take on Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Banana Coin, all these different kinds of coins. There are all these different cryptocurrencies out there. And immediately when it came out, it was right after Facebook kind of got in trouble for all of the stuff that they were doing with our privacy, with our protections and stuff like that. It just really wasn't a good look in general. And so then they come out with this. And one of the concerns with this Libra currency, cryptocurrency, is it would be a way for, it was sort of put out there as an option for foreign countries to be able to participate in sort of a global marketplace and to be able to find a new way instead of having to figure out how many pesos is equal to a US dollar or this or that Facebook would bridge the gap between all of these different currencies.
So I thought the whole idea with crypto was to be able to decentralize currency from some particular group of banks or what have you.
Yeah.
But right now we're talking Facebook is being said bank?
Kind of, yeah, with Facebook sort of at the middle of it. And the problem that people sort of realized is not so much about individuals using this, but the problem is that think of a company like Amazon.
Right.
You know what? There are a lot of products from Amazon that I enjoy. There are a lot of services from Amazon that I enjoy.
Yeah, such as a twerking bear. But Amazon gets away with paying very few taxes in the United States and elsewhere because of the clever things that they do to make sure that they're not having to pay those taxes. All of the shell games.
Yes. So it's already an issue with these taxes. And then you have these companies, the idea is that they become a part of this. They jump on this cryptocurrency game And then they're using a new method to pay for their businesses, for the work that they do. And suddenly you have something that's even less able to be tracked than the US dollar. And so these companies are skipping out on even more taxes.
Of course.
That's the big concern. So with all of that said about Facebook's Libra cryptocurrency, just a little bit ago, PayPal said, you know what? I don't think we're going to do this. I think we might just take a little step back and let y'all do your thing. And then right after that, eBay, Visa, MasterCard, and Stripe all jumped ship.
All of the big online people.
Yeah, I mean, these are you've got PayPal and Stripe are huge for sort of the backbone of payments on the internet.
Right, global.
Yeah, and MasterCard and Visa, like, let's talk about these credit card companies.
Boy.
This is huge. And what's fascinating to me is that in this article, they have the person who is in charge. Let's see, it's David Marcus, which, by the way, previously the president of PayPal. Mm-hmm. And David Marcus says, now let's don't read into this. This is not necessarily the fate of Libra is at the hands of this.
Oh, some folks call
change.
that spin.
They got a little English on that
some
that
folks
story.
Call that spin.
Yeah. I don't know. I just I don't think that companies are they see the reactions that have taken place.
Right.
They see where Facebook continues to be something that people aren't trusting. And like you have to have some amount of I think there's some amount of faith that you have to place in something like currency for it to be legitimate, right?
Now, let me ask you this. So if we have Facebook and we have the whole connotation behind Facebook, let's say that connotation was a lot more positive. Mm-hmm. Do you still think this would happen? You know, because people are still flocking to Facebook and still using it, even with the negative connotation that Facebook has.
Yes.
So,
well, okay. So I think this is kind of this is a very good question, but I think this is kind of like a multi-step answer because one, I think that the people who can make this a thing, the people who can, who are in charge of making the Libra cryptocurrency something worth getting into, they're the ones that know about Facebook's negative connotations.
Okay.
And so it kind of doesn't matter if the everyday person is not aware. The people that are using Facebook are the people, and the people that like enjoy Facebook are the people who know nothing about Facebook's negativity. You know what I mean?
Is that true? Right.
Yeah. Like
totally oblivious to all
they're oblivious
behind
to
the curtain stuff.
Mm-hmm. And so they aren't going to be interested in, I could probably go into my house and not into my house, into my mom's house with all of my siblings there and go, Facebook Libra cryptocurrency. And they'd be like, Mikah, did you have 6 cups of coffee again? Like, they're not going to know what I'm talking about. That's not, you know what I mean? So it's not them that's sort of making a big stink right now, I think.
Right. So it's coming up higher in the chain.
Absolutely.
I don't know what to think about it other than it's probably a good idea that they're getting out because of all of those different ramifications from a business standpoint and the trouble that they can get into if this goes sideways. Mm-hmm. So it makes perfect sense to me because what has Facebook proven on a business standpoint other than they know how to gather a ton of data, not necessarily manage data?
Yes. Yes.
This is a big difference,
Yeah. It's, they still have a plan to launch in 2020. Whether that ends up happening, I think remains to be seen because...
Is it in January 1st or December 31st?
It says in 2020. So knowing that, it could be December 31st. And with that, I think that we have a situation where... we've got plenty of time for the companies to continue to jump ship.
Right.
And in fact, I think the only companies involved now are 2 that I've never heard of. So it said that
it's looking even better, folks.
Yeah. It's like the only people staying on board are ones that nobody even uses. I shouldn't say that. There have to be some that are using it, but payment platforms that I have not ever heard of. And so it's Mercado Pago.
and Pay You. I said I was low on energy, but I guess I've been bouncing around so much that our studio engineer keeps having to adjust the camera for me, and I feel bad. I'm going to try to sit still. But Mercado Pago and Pay You. Have you heard of either of those?
Negative. Just crickets right now.
Right, exactly. Now, apparently Uber and Lyft are also still involved in the project. And in fact, CNBC reached out to them and they said, nothing has changed about our involvement with the project. But I'm curious, like, do they even have a foot in the game? Like, it doesn't affect them as much. Like, okay, so say you start go ahead.
I think it's ideal that Uber and Lyft stays involved because of the current state of their own businesses and just trying to keep relevancy, keep afloat, and
keep afloat.
Right, and not get booted out of the ecosystem. Yeah. So it makes sense that they're going to stick around because they can continue to leech off of somebody and probably get a second life, if you will.
Well, I see it like this. They're only, anybody can go ahead. Well, not anybody, but many people can go ahead and strike up one of these cryptocurrencies. And despite that, there are only so many that are actually going to stick. Mm-hmm. And so let's say I start a business where I sell macarons. Mm-hmm. No, not macaroons, not the coconut chunky things. I'm talking about macarons. And so I start up this company and I am like, I want to offer these where you can buy them with the US dollar. Mm-hmm. And I want to offer these where you can buy them with Bitcoin. And I want to offer these where you can buy them with, there's this company that's backed by Facebook and it's backed by, at the time, PayPal, and it's backed by, why not keep your foot in that game so that in the future, if it does become a thing, then you can offer it. It doesn't hurt them at all, I think, to play in this space and say, hey, maybe one day you can use, I don't even know what's an individual Libra called? A Librink?
I have no idea. I wonder about this currency because the first thing that comes to my mind was all of the ruckus that was called from BitCurrency and the actual power that went into it and the, the carbon footprint.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
Is this the same scenario with Libra? Or is it going to take Facebook or whomever it is that's going to be centralizing all of this, generating this computational currency some kind of way and keep costs down and keep the carbon footprint small? I just don't know. Probably because I don't believe it's going to happen.
Right.
That's why I don't know.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I don't know that they're even going to end up doing it. It's so they're using a basket of currencies. It says. So that means that
sounds like more of a mess.
Made up of the United States dollar, the euro, the Japanese yen, the pound sterling, and the Singapore dollar.
Okay.
And so all of these currencies are the reserve for this. So it actually is kind of playing off of currencies that already exist,
right?
Which is interesting. But again, I
will say if it's something that's going to be universal, that totally makes sense in making it easier for global transactions and not have to worry about all of the exchange rates and changes and things like that.
I like that.
So that I give them credit for that.
I just don't want Facebook to be the one doing
it. Right. Can somebody else do it? Right. And I'm not saying Google or Amazon either. Right. Can somebody else do it?
Yeah. Not Apple, I don't know who does it, but yeah, I like the idea of having a global currency as well, that you're not playing the jump around,
right.
How much is this coin currently worth? How much is it not game? But with it being backed by Facebook, it does make me a little bit, And again, I think it goes back to, what we talked about here, where we've got a situation of there not being that trust in Facebook that's from a government point now, a United States government point,
right.
at least. Right. And I would say the EU too. The EU really doesn't like Facebook. So we've got these.
They've already gotten, 5 billion out of them recently? And they're just itching to get more,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go ahead and launch this new payment platform. Let's see what we can do. And so I don't know if it was dead at launch or dead from the get-go or however we want to phrase it. But
I won't call it dead, but I will say it's been limping.
It's limping. You know what? I'm gonna give it.
some side eye.
Side eye?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I feel about it. I'm just sort of like, okay, we'll see. We'll see. That's my official ruling. And you've got limping, I've got side eye, and we'll see what happens to Libra.
I love it.
Or Libra.
I love it.
I still want to know what a Libro, a Libran.
Yeah, what is the actual unit, if you will?
A unit of Libra. It's called, what is a Libra in the zodiac?
I'm not smart enough for that either.
But the internet is. Let's see what it says. It is scales. Cool. Thought it was going to be like an animal or something, but it is scales. So I guess we will call it
waiting.
We're waiting to find out what it's called. That's what we're going to do.
That's what we're going to do. All right.
Oh, God.
Well, next up, we're going to talk a little bit about, phones and stuff, because this is Twit and we love talking about the hottest phones and stuff that's coming out. But before we get to that, we want to thank one of our sponsors. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by the folks at Microsoft Mechanics. This is Microsoft's official show, and it offers up the latest Microsoft technology. So every week, you get an opportunity to hop into their engineering deep dive on the latest tech announcements from Microsoft, touch on the trending IT topics, even bring you some details, step-by-step, multi-part tutorials for examples such as getting into Windows virtual desktops or large-scale Windows and Office deployment. These aren't your usual rambling how-to videos or off-the-cuff tech videos that you could see out there online. These are carefully crafted and verbally and visually with demos and how it works graphical explanations. Most are under 15 minutes, so they get to the point without wasting your time. They're like the visual cliff notes for Microsoft Tech. The best part, it's free. You want to check out everything from the latest, such as the Surface devices, cloud or on-premise infrastructure improvements across Azure and Windows, database architectures, management and admin tools, security and compliance controls, productivity innovation, and more across Microsoft's complete range of products and services for business. And if you're going to Microsoft Ignite in Orlando this November, the Mechanics team will be presenting live every day with engineering and product leaders Mark Rusinovich, Aaron Chappell, Brad Anderson, Julia White, Rob Lefferts, and more, so you can see the tech in action behind the announcements. So whether you're a tech enthusiast, IT professional, or architect looking to stay up to date, visit aka.ms/TNW Mechanics today and subscribe. Again, that's aka.ms/TNW Mechanics, or subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Watch Microsoft Mechanics, your free go-to source to discover the latest Microsoft tech. All right, we thank you, Microsoft Mechanics. Okay, so now there's been a whole lot of discussions here recently. We've had that iPhone 11, whatever, what's it called?
iPhone 11 Pro,
12 Pro
iPhone
Plus,
11
yada,
Pro
yada.
Max,
You had that,
iPhone 11,
you had the Samsung phones, and then next week,
Galaxy Folds.
We got all of the stuff from Pixel.
What is it? Pixel 5, Pixel 4?
Pixel 4, I think. So we need to take a step back, though. We need to take a step back.
Okay.
Because a lot of people at one point said the iPhone was the phone that set everything off and changed everything from a technology innovation standpoint.
A lot of people said that, yeah.
A lot of tech pundits, that is.
Yeah.
But let's take a look at my man on 1-0. Tariq Ishmael on 1-0 brought up a very fascinating point, and we took a look at the Blackberry. You remember the Blackberry? Are you old enough to remember the Blackberry?
Yes, I'm old enough to remember the Blackberry. That's a berry you pick from a bush, and
okay, so yeah, you do remember. You do remember. When I read this story, I had to I laughed to myself a little bit, but I think he hit it on the head, because the Blackberry, before we had iPhone, this device was like the device of the professional, if you will. It wasn't a device that you saw people going around playing video games on it. Eventually, you did see a couple people get a hold of it and want to use it as like a social platform where you had BlackBerry Messenger and things of that sort. But this device, it really did set things apart. Other than some of the other pitfalls of having a separate server to run it on the enterprise standpoint, that was a bit of a headache. But again, they were forward thinking at RIM as far as having security on these mobile devices, especially when you're dealing with C-level executives out in the world making deals, so on and so forth. When I read through this, I thought about the Blackberries that I had, and I had one of their least popular phones and absolutely loved it. Now, do you remember the Blackberry Storm?
Not by name. Not by name. Let me see.
It was RIM's answer to the iPhone, if you will.
Okay, yes.
Because it was just all touchscreen. It didn't have a physical keyboard.
One of my good friends had the Blackberry Storm, and I remember being so jealous. So jealous.
I loved it, but most people hated it, and of course, it flopped.
Oh.
It flopped. But when you go back and look at that time, most people were saying, you know what, we want our physical keyboards. Mm-hmm. So that was like the big story and the big argument is bring back the physical keyboard because we're out here busy, blah, blah, blah.
We're
blah,
business
blah,
folks. And we need to business on our business keyboards. No wonder why you liked it.
It was.
That's yours right there.
Well, yeah, that's mine. It's got an orange skin on it for the folks on the live chat watching it.
That's a Clemson.
It's a beautiful phone. But no,
skin.
It is. I enjoyed that phone, and I enjoyed just the history lesson that Mr. Ishmael gave with it, where we take for granted the stuff that we have today with the iPhone, as far as the flick scrolling. When BlackBerry released the Storm, you scrolled through it, but it wasn't as smooth. But at the same time, it was still quite innovative. Mm-hmm. Apple just came in and did what Apple normally does and say, hey, we can take this and make it better. Mm-hmm. So I like to give him credit and say, you know what, you're right. It started with BlackBerry, with all of these technological smartphones that we have out there today that we really take for granted.
Wow.
Did you ever get to play around with Blackberries? You said you played around with the Storm.
Yeah, and there was another one. It had like a leather back and it had a keyboard, but then it was also touchscreen.
Oh, that was the was it not the Curve? The Key?
Maybe that's, let's say, Blackberry Key. Blackberry Key.
Because it flopped too.
No, that wasn't it, I don't think. This one felt, the one that I played around, well, maybe it is. Whatever was the one that I played around with.
I remember them having a touchscreen and a keyboard because they wanted to appease everybody and say, you know what, well, you're going to get your touchscreen. And for those of you that love keyboards, we got a keyboard too, so stop complaining. And it still didn't sell.
Maybe his wasn't, maybe his was not a
Blackberry Bold
touch. Blackberry Bold, I think that's the one.
It. Blackberry Bold.
The Blackberry Bold. I was in love with that little device. It was so pretty.
Thank you, Mr. John.
Yeah, it was so pretty, and I remember being very jealous of it. And then I also had several friends who were on BlackBerry Messenger.
Yep, BBM.
And I'm like, darn it, I want to be part of BlackBerry Messenger.
It was a different time back in the early 2000s.
It was the best of time. It was the worst of times.
I remember watching House of Cards, and in House of Cards, they had all BlackBerry.
Did they really?
Everybody had BlackBerry until a couple of years later. But that's just another one of those status symbols. We are for the productivity types. And all
right.
That.
Yeah.
Because they clearly could have invested in having iPhones for the staff.
It was the executive phone.
Right.
And my friend was very much like he knew what he was doing. Like the rest of us had our Android devices or iPhones, but he very much stuck with BlackBerry for the longest time because he felt very businessy about it. And like, I can check my email with this little what is the little trackpad
the little
dot?
Trackball.
Yeah, the little trackball. Yeah. Loved that he did.
Endless scrolling. I love how even that is mentioned inside of the story from Mr. Tariq. But that's the beginning of what we have now when you're going through your Instagram feed and doing this. It all started with BlackBerry.
Wow, that scroll dial on the side of the device.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And I wonder, again, he talks about it being the original social network. Mm-hmm. BlackBerry Messenger was. And seeing people chatting back and forth on this exclusive
and the read
platform.
Receipts. They saw it.
Yes.
I know they saw it. Why aren't they answering?
You left me on red.
It was so good. I thought that was a fascinating story, and it just I thought it needed some attention because I too forgot about some of the beauty of BlackBerry back then, and took for granted for what we have now, coming out with all of these 4 lenses on the phones and neural networks and beautiful hardware that's recycled and refreshed and still costs $1,000.
Yes, I wonder too. Because for a while it really was, as they're talking about in here again, a status symbol, and I kind of want to. This makes me want to go back and look at the period of time where that shift happened, where we went from the BlackBerry being a status symbol to the more beautified devices being a status symbol, because it was like you might have your little phone where you do these silly things where you have a fart app.
I wonder if it was right about the time we had iPhone 3G. I wonder if it was about that time.
Might be.
Because it seems like that's when it really, really got popular as far as just having an iPhone, and people were, if you owned an iPhone, you were more than likely to get a date, and those crazy stories came out back then. Not right.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to look into that, just simply because
iPhone 3G, 3GS, whatever it was called. I think it was right about that time.
Yeah.
At least in my circles, anyway.
There you go. Yeah, it could be different. I mean, Jay-Z was rapping about it, it says. So, can you imagine rapping about BlackBerry today? They'd be like, "No."
The kids are going to be like, "What?"
You're like, "No, honey.
Why are you talking about
sit down.
fruit?"
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you're talking about your BlackBerry kombucha. Oh, I get it. Jay-Z.
Come a long way.
Yeah, we have come a long way, haven't we? Getting from there to here. That plastic, that rubber, and now we've got glass and aluminum. Yeah. So, well, I've been cursed by some and applauded by others for saying aluminium. See, the problem is I'm mostly joking when I say it, but people who hear it, who want it to be said that way, are like, "Yeah, you say it the right way." No, I was just kidding.
Trust me, they don't get me. Not one bit.
That's a fun little look back that we have there. For those just joining us, I saw some conversation in the chat about what's going on here, and thank you for joining us for this episode live. We are having discussions about this week in tech news, and
we're talking about Jay-Z chat room.
Says Jay-Z used to rap about his 56-inch CRT TV. I hope so. I hope he was like, "Yeah, it's got 9 inches on the back plus 12. And also, it's got a huge screen. It makes a lot of noise. And when I touch a magnet to it, it ruins the screen."
Ruins it.
Bae.
Those were the days. Days.
Lord. Thank you all for joining me for that Jay-Z impression.
He will be platinum in a month, folks. He'll be platinum.
Please don't do that again.
All right. Let's talk about something that has kind of been really on my mind as of late. And in fact, I want to start, John, with a tweet, if we could. I was scrolling through Twitter the other day, as one does, and Noah Smith put out this post that uses a curse word, so I won't say that part, but holy cow, there are a lot of American companies doing pro-China censorship. So let's start with this. As many of you have heard or seen or come across, there are protests in Hong Kong, and there is a there is an interesting dynamic and many disagreements, and there's a lot to this. But you've got mainland China and Hong Kong in disagreement with one another, and Hong Kong has sort of, in many ways, existed as a place outside, in terms of governmentally, a place outside of the rest of mainland China.
Yeah.
And with that has come folks within Hong Kong looking at the censorship that does exist there now and wanting more freedom. And these protests are about Hong Kongers, as they call themselves, claiming that freedom. And what we've seen recently is, with China's investment in United States companies, there are a lot of companies who do not want to ruffle feathers of these huge investments.
All right. It's a business move.
It's a business move, and it has me very, very, very irked. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of these first. We've got Activision, which is, Blizzard. They banned a player for supporting a Hong Kong democracy protest. They took his winnings away after he won. And then the people who interviewed him, who were not responsible in any way for what he said, they fired the two people who interviewed him as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
I didn't
this
know
was
about
just
the
like
interviewing part.
Yeah. So this was just like a whole swath of no. And we've got Apple, who censored the Taiwan flag on iOS, and there's a lot to that. Hong Kong is very supportive of Taiwan because Taiwan did what Hong Kong wants to do in many ways, and sort of like seeing itself as separate from China. And again, it's very complicated. From within mainland China, there's a policy called the One China policy. And it says that all of these things that are China are China. There's no like Hong Kong is a separate thing, Taiwan is a separate thing. It's China no matter what.
And I get that myself.
Yes.
It's just home is home.
Yeah. And they don't want to acknowledge them as separate entities. But the problem is these individual geographical locations the people within those geographical locations do in many ways acknowledge themselves as separate. And so you have a lot that happens there. The thing that I wanted, that was specifically kind of came up is that Apple blocked an app that was being downloaded in Hong Kong that showed protesters where police were on the maps.
Right.
And so, as you can see, we pulled up the little graph there to show you, or the map there, and protesters were using this as a way to see, okay, I can protest here and I'll be safe from police, or if I protest here, I will not.
But that wasn't Apple's spin, though, right?
Was or wasn't?
That wasn't their spin, right?
No, I can't remember how they went about it, but I mean, Apple, there are multiple things that they did, and it all just comes down to the fact that clearly they are not wanting to upset a place that accounts for a lot of their business.
A lot of their business.
The NBA.
I want to say I saw something where it was like targeting, quote unquote, the police officers and would degrade the safety of the police officers.
Yeah.
Was that the...
That may have been the spin. I mean, the fact was that the People's Daily, which of course is the Chinese government's newspaper, said that the app betrayed the feelings of the Chinese people, and then it also accused the developer of harboring malicious motives, and then asked if Apple was an accomplice of the rioters.
Oh, man.
So whenever the Chinese government's saying, is Apple being in cahoots with the protesters, with the rioters as they called them, then of course they're going to cave for the sake of this. Now, and I want to hear, we talked a little bit about this before the show, and I want to hear your perspective, or sort of the kind of place that you've come to from this. But I do want to explain. I've had the privilege and the blessing, the benefit, whatever you want to call it, of having made a couple new friends here in California. And one of those friends grew up in mainland China, and then moved to Hong Kong for a short period of time, and then now resides in the U.S. And another one of those friends is Hong Kong all the way.
Okay.
And I have
born and raised in Hong Kong.
Yes. And so I have had conversations with first with the guy from mainland China who moved to Hong Kong, and I didn't understand this stuff. And so when the protests came up, I talked to him about it and heard his story, and him explaining the history of Taiwan, the history of Hong Kong, the history of mainland China, and the disagreements and agreements between these places, and his education of these things. And so I took what he said at his word, and listened to it and said, "Oh my, there was a lot to it."
Right.
Later,
You're an
I came.
outsider.
Yeah, exactly. And later, I came to know the guy who is Hong Kong, all the way, and he had a whole different perspective on the situation, and his history was a little bit different. And then the two of them were together, and I sort of sat back and, asked them both questions,
right,
and saw the disagreements that existed between them, and how in many ways they both have just come to believe that the other is propagandized to all hell, essentially. That there's no way that what this person has learned and what this person believes is only because of their government or their people, and what this person is, it's the same thing. And so I am going to be able to be seeing them this weekend, and I've wanted to get the latest take, especially with all of these American companies.
Right.
And when I told my one friend who was mainland China, then Hong Kong, that I wanted to have this conversation, he said, well, please do, but just know that when you talk to him, keep in mind that he's Americanized, and so his opinions are going to be different. And so it's very ingrained.
But that makes sense, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are here in the Western part of the world, and we're going to have our own core values and things that we're going to believe in, and sometimes they're not going to line up with what's going on in China, good, bad, or indifferent. But at the same time, the people that are in China and Hong Kong, what have you, some may feel that this is okay with what they're dealing with. Some may just be totally indifferent. And then you're going to have the folks in Hong Kong that's going to say, hey, no, we're totally against this regime. But as an American, it's really, really, really difficult for us to pass any judgment on it, because it's not our way of thinking. It's not our culture. It's not how we came up. But the people in China, that's how they came up. And it may be okay for those people in China, but who are we to judge?
Right. I think that we have no place to judge on the rules and regulations that do not result in human rights violations. When they're not involving human rights violations, yes, I agree, that's not our place to judge. When people are being harmed,
right, there's a difference there.
That's where the conversation comes down to. And I am glad, at the very least, that we talked not too long ago on this show to a person who spoke with an app developer who had created an app that he intended for it to be used at music festivals. And it used Bluetooth to communicate with other locals.
Okay.
In Hong Kong, protesters are having trouble communicating with one another using the internet, because the internet is controlled by the Chinese government.
It's in China.
And so they are able to use this app with Bluetooth. And so in that way, I'm happy that we are giving, are like inadvertently or otherwise, that we as a nation, and the values that we do have here sometimes are helpful for people who are trying to make a difference for themselves and for others. But yeah, I agree with you in the sense that there's no way that we will ever understand exactly the difference in those things. And it genuinely was a fascinating and quite the educational experience for me we were literally eating ice cream, and I sort of had to like,
then it just got real.
Yeah, it got real, and like my ice cream melted because the heat in the room changed. No, and eventually they both just decided that they weren't going to talk about it anymore, because there was no agreement to be had. And I think the most interesting thing to me, and the thing that made me realize how these perspectives are different, was that my one friend from mainland China, who moved to Hong Kong, he had expectations for what the person who lived in Hong Kong was going to say or wasn't going to say, and what he believed or didn't believe. And then to just sort of sit back and let them communicate their viewpoints on things, it was all very different. And so I think that it was an example of how we don't necessarily, like, we can't let our perspectives and what we think someone else, like, you can't write other people's scripts.
Nope.
You can't determine what another person is going to think other than learning from them and hearing what they have to say. And I think that it's very complicated, this
it's
stuff.
Complicated, but then as a American that has bought into whatever Apple created or Google or Amazon has created, a lot of us are going to have a moral conflict with that. And the problem is we are seeing these companies as people. We got to draw the line. They're companies. Companies are in existence for profit about 90% of the time, right? They're not just doing it for fun.
Right.
And that's a business move. What happened with Apple? I don't care how they try to spend it.
Right.
That's a business move.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think we in the United States, though, I agree with what you're saying, that absolutely this comes from a business place, and we can't think of these companies as people.
We don't have to like it, but we have to understand that is a business
that it's a business move. But I don't think that it's a bad thing for us to push back.
I agree.
And to say, I'm supporting you with my money, or I'm not supporting you with my money. In fact, there was a recent article that was published, my pals at Mobile Nations, there's a guy, he has played like hundreds of hours of Blizzard's games, Jez Corden. And he just said that he's no longer going to be playing, he's boycotting Blizzard because of this choice. And that, I think, is where our values can play a role.
Right. That's how you hit back when it comes to challenging companies that you don't agree with, whether it's their practices or, when people were up in arms about Amazon and their work conditions for their staff in the warehouses, easiest thing to do is just stop shopping there. Amazon will see that on the bottom line eventually.
Yeah. If you have enough people. Now, and you had a really interesting take when you talked about, and I think this often does happen. We, as humans, as American humans, I think have this a bit of a savior complex at times, and it's very easy for us to pay attention to things that are happening outside of the United States and want to take on I'm going to do what I can to fight for this. But
we got our own problems right here in our own backyard.
Right.
We look at, we're right here in Silicon Valley with Facebook, Google, and Amazon up the road. Everybody's right here in our backyard. And if you go down the streets of San Francisco or LA or what have you, you're going to trip over a homeless person. There's a reason for that. You go to the Googleplex, and heck, some of the Google staff have RVs, because they're not going to spend the money on the rent that's in the area. It's too daggum expensive, and it's cheaper for them to get an RV and live out of it. Something's wrong there.
Yeah.
But we're more concerned about, as Americans, if you will, we're more concerned about what's going on in the other side of the ocean versus trying to figure out what can we do to help the people right here in our own backyard. It's really sad to see the homeless people right near where I live. I just go out on a photo walk, and I noticed backpacks and stuff just sort of laying around. I'm thinking, oh man, there's homeless people here, and there's nothing I can do about it. But that's what we're dealing with right now in our own backyard.
Right. And we're sort of looking over that.
Yeah. It's like, they had some hard times. They had some bad luck, whatever. No, there's more to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my thoughts on it, and I'm sure people are going to disagree.
Well, there always be some disagree, but yeah, it's a tough thing. We want to focus on everything. But at the end of the day, I'm really kind of appalled with the number of companies who are sort of just giving in to, well, it's our bottom line, and so we have to bow down, as it were, and they're changing maps, they're changing the names of locations. They are like apologizing for flights that took place that went to a place called Taiwan instead of China, Taiwan, and they're cutting live streams, and in some places, like, you can't talk about these things, you can't bring up. It's kind of awful.
It is.
And yeah, luckily there's a little bit that we can do in those ways where we can sort of try to hold these companies responsible. But I agree, there's a lot going on.
It is. It's sad, but that's good stuff, man. Like I said, if anybody wants to push back on them, the best way to do it nowadays is to push back with your dollar. And when you stop supporting these big tech companies that are doing these practices and you hit that bottom line, they'll listen eventually. All right. So I have a question for you. Just how good do you feel about your digital lifestyle as far as being secured and locked down and managing your privacy in day to day? You feel pretty good about that? If I was to ask you what 2FA was, would you know what that is?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah.
You would.
Yeah. Yeah.
You would. I came across a story from Pew Research where they found that less than half of the people surveyed, the adults surveyed, had pretty much no idea about their own digital knowledge as far as handling security online and understanding the different protocols and procedures that are out there. Now, granted, folks, we're not going to sit here and say everybody is a tech geek and tech guru. We get that.
Right.
But we have so much smart tech today, wink, wink, that has infiltrated our homes. We should probably try to figure out a little bit more of the why that smart tech of today works and understand what's going on behind the scenes, even if it's just our smartphones, because there's a lot that's going on from a data tracking and collecting and how ads are coming off to you and so forth. But yeah, sadly, it says that adults are struggling with that. Now, I have yet to sit down with my kids and ask them these same questions. And I got a hunch they may know a little bit more, but then again, that's because I've sort of educated them on it. I wonder what it is for the average teen that's out there, everybody that's out there jumping on to play Fortnite or whatever it is that Epic is putting out there. They have all of these registration steps. You can't just willy-nilly jump on there and play. You have to put in some type of personal information. I wonder if our youth understands the value of that going in. I wonder if the adults that allows them to play said game understand the value of that. It was a pretty nifty survey that was handled out there, and it just opened my eyes, because even myself, being a so-called geek, I still have to be cognizant of those things. We still have to worry about when I go and make that purchase on Amazon is going to know, hey, well, last time you bought this, I need to know why that happens.
Yeah.
It's not just going up to Congress and saying, hey, we need to do something about these tech companies. We still have some responsibility as consumers ourselves to know what's going on. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. So I thought that this, the study or the survey that was put out there, these questions really are basic questions. And
they're not difficult.
Yeah, the link will be on the show notes on the website, so you can go and check it out yourself. But I'm not at all in any way surprised at the results of this study. And it's not, I want to be super clear here. I'm not trying to be a tech elitist or, criticize people for being quote unquote stupid or anything like that. It's not stupidity. It is pure ignorance. And ignorance often has like a negative connotation with it, but I don't mean it in that way.
There's a difference in ignorance and stupidity.
Absolutely. Ignorance is just not knowing. And folks don't know this stuff. And I think that is because there is a fundamental failure on the part of whomever is responsible. I don't know. Whomever is responsible for making these things more important to the average person, that they can and want to understand this. I think the one survey question, can you identify a picture of Jack Dorsey? I don't care if you know that. Nobody needs to know that. That's not important. But many of these questions are ones that people should know, and should know in my opinion, for the sake of their security, their privacy online, and things like that.
I think you have a little easier questions out there, especially with today's data breaching that happens all the time. You ask someone about phishing, that seems to perk up a little bit more than it would have 5 years ago. Things like that, I get it. But I'm pretty sure no one's going to understand the difference between HTTP versus HTTPS when they go into their browser.
Right.
I've said browser to people and they're like, What's a browser?
Yes, go to your browser of choice. My browser of choice. I'm not on my Nintendo. Now, and net neutrality, I think, is that's. I feel like that's step 2. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, let's get them through step 1 first.
Right. Net neutrality is not necessarily for the common knowledge.
Yeah. And I don't think that it needs to be right now. But this, again, is a conversation about things. Things move so quickly.
Right.
And humans, they come up with these ideas and they just run with them.
Right.
And you just are having all these companies springing up and everybody's making and making and making. And there's not even time to slow down and figure out how we get people to be interested in and to know the everybody, when they see the terms of service and the privacy policy, we're all hitting boom, 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 boom. Yep. And that's because we don't care about it.
Right.
Because there was never a point where someone said, we need to make people care about this thing. And there are 2 reasons, I think, for that. Okay. One, because people, they kind of knew, oh my gosh, all this legalese, no one's going to want to pay attention to it. But also because there are some companies out there who would like for you to skip through that part. We can use all of your information for however we want to do it. They don't want people, reading through that and seeing it. But I don't think it's all that negative. I don't think it's every company's out there nefariously going, let's get all their data and scoop it up. There are just companies that are like, they think about the onboarding process and how many people sort of bail out on the onboarding process. We just want them to be able to get through it. And people, they download a new app and they, want to try it out. I understand that, but it's because we never took the time, I feel, to set up the emotional or mental connection to the importance of understanding that stuff. And it's too doggone late. I'm not going to curse. This is a podcast. It's too doggone late to do that. And I think that now it is a matter of education from a young age that those things matter. My youngest brother, not by my doing, but just by his understanding of everything, pays more attention than I thought. He doesn't just start a new app and it's like, can the app have this and can the app have this? And he stops and reads each one of those. And like I said,
that's few and far between.
Right. Whenever I was like, I sort of watched him and I'm like, oh, wow, you actually are that proud that's brother impressive. Moment for sure.
That's impressive.
And asking him about that, it was because of awareness and because of understanding, Snapchat, knowing that like, oh, people can hop in there and see you on a map and can see what you're doing and can see this and see that. And he didn't want that. And he knew that that was a thing that could happen and he didn't want that to be a thing that could happen for him. So it's a mixture, I think, of not just of proper education and informing people of what can happen, but it's also just like there has to be some bit of slowing down and dropping the importance of that in there for people to get them interested.
What do you think it's going to take to help, number one, raise awareness and have people, as Chumley said in there, practice it? Because he says education isn't training. When you say training, that means you're practicing what you've learned. And you can put up a bunch of different pop-ups or what have you on this app and have people try to read it and understand it. But if they don't take the time to practice those precautions, what's the point of it? Is it going to take some type of huge breach or security issue to scare the crap out of them?
That happens all the time and it doesn't work.
So I just wonder, what is it going to take? I think about my kids with this and how I had to sort of educate them and watch them, just as you say, go through and make sure they're trying to read this and that before they just click okay. And most of the time they do come to me and say, hey, does this look okay? But that's, again, I've educated them and they've been trained and they're practicing that. I think about them, but I also think about the other kids in the school that have no idea.
Yeah.
And so since they don't have any idea about it, that's just going to go on years and years down the road with ignorance.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty scary.
Yeah. It's very terrifying. The number, like right now, there are plenty of people literally in this moment hitting accept on handing over all parts of their data. You know what I mean? And that is frightening, but it goes like we've hit we pulled back the handle on the train, and this train is not stopping. In fact, it's going down a hill, so it just keeps getting faster and faster.
Congress, they did try to yell at Zuckerberg about terms of services in that whole hearing, and it's not necessarily his fault, but that was good business acumen, because they knew nobody wanted to read all of that stuff. And you and I, we just recently read a terms of service where we saw some pretty contradictory statements in there about our own personal data.
Yeah.
And I could have very easily hit accept on that, but I didn't. You know, but they wrote it in there so far deep into those terms of service, and I had to spend some time to get to that. And they know that.
They know that. Yeah. And so Leo has talked a little bit about this part in particular, the what does it take thing. And there are folks out there who say, it's up to an individual person totally and completely to be able to protect to know what's happening to them, to be able to protect their privacy. I feel like that is an unfair point of view, because I could easily say then, it is up to me to understand how every part of this body that I live with for 95 years works, and I should be able to fix anything that goes wrong with me myself. We go to a doctor and we have, like people have to be able to do other things, and I don't think that it's fair to say that everybody should just automatically understand all this stuff or should take the time to understand it, because you don't have time necessarily. Right. And so his point is that there's no way that we're ever going to get people to care about all of this stuff or to pay attention to all of this stuff. And so it really does have to come from a law perspective, that we have to have rules and regulations in place that don't change the way that we interact with our technology. Instead, they put it on the company to do a better job of informing us and letting us access that information, to understand where our data is going, to understand how it's used, and to be able to say no to that data being used, to be able to say, I know you have this here, and I know how it works for me in this app, and so I'm going to let you have that because it's helpful to me. But then, 5 years later, you find a different app that you want to use. I should be able to go back and say, okay, now I don't want that data there anymore.
You revoke it.
And right now, Google and Amazon have been doing a very good job of this. Amazon and Google both have these new privacy platform, or what is like a privacy dashboard,
checklists and stuff.
And you go through and you say, after 3 months, I want you to delete all of the data for this particular thing.
Right.
And you can set it to a year. You can set it. I love that. I went in and changed all of that. And the same thing with Amazon's Alexa devices. You can have that data deleted after a period of time. I want them to have it for a little bit, because I am happy to be able to say, that it knows the locations that I visit most frequently.
Some patterns and things.
Notice the patterns. But after a while, I don't want them to have that information anymore, and so it can go away. That the regulations and things like that help put those into place. And then it becomes a little bit easier, for those of us who do know what we're talking about, to say, okay, sister, I want, my sister, okay, sis, here's where you go to check on all of this stuff, and here's why it matters. And I think it becomes much easier at that point when the convenience is there.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Do you think you could write a terms of service?
Me?
Why not?
Because I don't know enough law words.
Well, see, that's the thing. I think it should take someone like us.
I see what you mean.
That's we understand the significance of the data that's out there, and we also understand the significance of those companies wanting to collect that data, because it's good marketing for them. I get that, but we need to put it in the language that everybody could understand. My mother, my sister, my little nephew, or what have you. So I think I could. It probably wouldn't be approved, but I think I could.
If I had all of the information that I needed to make it happen, then yes, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I wish I could scroll back up. There was a comment in the chat, and it said, people go out and buy a computer.
Yep.
And they should. Oh, do you have it? Can I
read
it?
I'm trying to find it.
It was from Loquacious V2, I think, and it was just moments ago. And it was basically saying that, someone goes out and buys a computer, they should be able to They should figure out how to
People
use.
don't find time. People don't find time. They make time. They made time to go buy computers and use them, so it's time to learn to do it responsibly.
Now, Loquacious, I assume you have a car. Do you take care of all the maintenance on your car by yourself?
Mm-hmm. Survey says. That's a good point, though.
This is my point. We don't necessarily have the time for all of these things. Yeah. We have people in place. Mm-hmm. Okay, now, why do you think it's a bad assumption? Oh, you don't have a car. Okay. Well, that's good.
Well played. Well played. But no, I see where you're going with that, though, because we can't be professionals on everything.
Absolutely. We cannot be experts in every single thing. You know. I made the choice to adopt a dog. I think under that logic, then I would need to know everything there is to know about the dog so that I could help the dog in any situation. No, I can't. And so I take my dog to the vet, and the vet does that for me.
That's right.
And the same thing applies here. My mom has many things she has to worry about.
Yep.
She doesn't have time to go through and understand everything that there is to learn about the computer or about the phone or about the app. That's why I don't think that is maybe for this person, if you've decided that, every shirt that, you get a tear in, you repair it yourself, and every piece of cloth, how to mend and those things. That's wonderful. You're awesome. And I'd love to have a little bit of your brain, but day to day, we can't expect that from everybody. Right. That's just not, I think, reasonable. And I think that puts too much onus again on individuals when in many ways it's the companies that came through in the first place and found ways to take our data and use our data and monetize our data and continue to exist through the monetization of our data. And so we're not
wool over our eyes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, pulling the wool over our eyes. That I mended myself, doggone it, because I learned everything there was to learn about that wool sweater.
Good stuff.
That's we could go on for hours about that topic. But yeah, check out that survey from Pew Research and see how you stack up to the competition. Now let's go ahead and move on. I want to talk Apple. We knew that they had that there was a U1 chip included in the iPhone. Yep. The most recent iPhones. And so this chip, it's called U1 because it is an ultra-wideband radio chip. Yep. And iFixit does these teardowns of the devices, and they look and they see what's inside and what Apple has made. It's amazing. I love looking at that stuff. And there is a very popular right now ultra-wideband chip out there that's called the Decawave ultra-wideband DW1000.
So nerded out.
Absolutely. Now, the Decawave ultra-wideband DW1000, they didn't know if Apple had just taken the DW1000 and customized it a little bit for themselves, or if what they said was true, that they developed their own chip. iFixit has determined that their chip is different from the popular one that you can get, from the company.
From everywhere else.
So that's been confirmed.
Found in everything else, I should say.
Yes. But what I want to talk about is, that's fine, that's cool. But what I want to talk about instead is the possibilities of an ultra-wideband chip and some of the exciting things that we can look forward to with this technology, because it's not just going to be Apple. We're sort of like on the verge of a ultra-wideband technology being included in lots of different things. Right. So the reason why it's called ultra-wideband is because genuinely the band through which you can send data is ultra-wide, whereas with the, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are far smaller bands. And I'm trying to find here. It's like, let's see.
So that usually limits the transmission far as how far it can go and barriers and things of that nature.
Absolutely. Here we go. So with Wi-Fi, you've got 20 megahertz wide channel, and Bluetooth only has 2 megahertz wide channel. Meanwhile, ultra-wideband has 500 megahertz. So again, 20 for Wi-Fi, 2 for Bluetooth, and 500 megahertz
much wider,
for UWB. And on top of that, most Wi-Fi devices operate in the 2.4 gigahertz frequency spectrum. Along with that are cordless phones, car alarms, and microwaves.
Yep, microwaves.
And so those are, and also Bluetooth and Zigbee devices. They're all in there. They're all clogging things up.
Yep.
And then, of course, there are some Wi-Fi devices that operate on the 5 gigahertz spectrum for that specific reason, because the 2.4 gigahertz is really clogged up. UWB operates on a whole different frequency. And so the way that they described it in this article, which I thought was great, is you've got like a standard garden hose, and that is Bluetooth. It's operating on the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. And as it's going through this, shooting out of the garden hose, there are rocks and things in the way.
Okay.
There are a bunch of rocks in the way. It's almost like spraying the water into like a Zen garden. There are a bunch of rocks in the way. Then you've got the Wi-Fi spectrum running on 5 gigahertz. It's a maintenance hose. It's a bit bigger, getting closer to fireman hose.
Right.
And it is spraying water. And instead of, a huge thing, it's not a rock garden. It's just every once in a while there's some rocks that get in the way. You go to UWB, you get a gigantic hose. Now we're talking like fireman's hose.
Right.
And there are no rocks in the way at all.
Right.
So you're able to push a bunch of data without anything being in the way of this. And what's even cooler is that Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, when they want to communicate with devices nearby and sort of figure out where they are, so you can think of like those little tracker tags and things like that, beacons, the way that they determine how far away the thing is signal strength. Well, if you've got rocks in the way or a wall in the way, then that's going to drop the signal a little bit, so it might make it think that it's farther away. With this, it doesn't use signal strength. It uses how long it takes the radio signal to travel between the two transmitters.
Oh, okay.
And so it's not strength.
So it's sending a ping and receiving
back.
Okay.
Exactly. So what this does, and another example that they've given, and I love this example because it was dogs, is like,
of course you do.
Right. I can't find Fido, or say, hey, boo-boo, I can't find Fido.
Right.
And then boo-boo says, well, head 200 feet north and look 5 feet down, and that's where the dog is going to be. It's super granular because we go from, it's from feet to centimeters difference.
Oh, wow.
The accuracy of ultra-wideband is centimeters.
And that's because it's nothing there clogging up the pipe. Right?
And because of, not because there's nothing there. Yeah.
So much bits going
Exactly.
through.
Because there's so much space. Absolutely.
Okay.
And so think of it like this. I loved this example too. This technology, you've got an ultra-wideband chip in this phone, and the Lyft app takes advantage of this chip. So this is in the future. This is not right now. The Lyft app knows that your driver has a phone that has an ultra-wideband chip in it, and that I have a phone that has an ultra-wideband chip in it. I step out at the airport, and I'm trying to find my Lyft driver. I hold up my phone, and it says, look through your device and follow the balloon. And then I look over in AR, and I know exactly right there, that's the Lyft driver I'm looking for.
That's nice.
That's awesome. And then another example of it being used is a car. When you walk up to it, if you are going to the trunk, it'll pop open just the trunk. If you're going to the passenger side, then it'll just unlock that door. It can figure out where you are in the car. Same thing for smart locks on your front door. It does a better job of understanding rather than using Bluetooth and those kinds of things.
Now, see, my question is, with it being that much data being spit out, if you will, how much of that is accessible for nefarious people to just snatch it?
Well, I don't know that.
I wonder about that.
And two, it's not necessarily like the things that are being sent. It's not. They're not using it for a bunch of data.
Okay.
Instead, it is like that there are all of these options and, all of this spectrum in place where they could. And so you could probably think of a future where I could put my phone down next to yours and we could transfer a video file in faster time than it takes Wi-Fi to transfer a video file between.
Right.
So that's, then you're sending a bunch of data.
P2P stuff.
Yeah, but most of the time it's these little pings that are going back and forth. And Jason Snell, he put together this excellent article. He was very smart. Mm-hmm. He knew that Apple was making a U1 chip. And, well, it had been announced. And he knew that Apple wasn't going to tell him much about the U1 chip.
Shocking.
So he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go find a company that makes ultra-wideband chips, and I'm going to talk to their PR person just so I can hear about the benefits of ultra-wideband. So he goes and he talks to this person who explains ultra-wideband technology through and through. And one of the things that they talk about is the superiority of its security to something like Bluetooth. And it has to do with the way that you can spoof Bluetooth signals. Mm-hmm. But because it's not using signal strength and instead is using it's like the speed of light transfers and blah, 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 blah. I don't know how it all works, but the article explains it. It is, 20 times more secure because you can't just spoof a signal and then become a beacon or a receiver.
Gotcha.
So in theory, it's more secure.
Right.
I can't just say that because I didn't quite understand it because it was very complex.
And this is on Mr. Snell's site?
Yeah, this is on 6 Colors. So head there at some point and check that out. In fact, I will look that up, get it to our editor, and make sure that's included in the show notes so you can check that out. But I'm not just excited about this for iPhone. I want to see this technology really take off and be used across all sorts of devices, and to see what it can do that our devices can't do right now.
Seems like it would be the new normal. Right?
Yes. Yeah, in the same way that NFC has taken its role. I really think that UWB, and in fact, that's what a lot of companies who make UWB chips are saying, is that like, ooh, people are buying them up. They're getting excited.
That's awesome. Man, I can remember getting my first couple of new NFC tags and people just really laughing at me how nerdy I was about those tags, but they really were cool back then.
Yes.
And it was neat to see what I could do just from walking into my old apartment, also known as Chateau Ghetto, and just swipe my phone at the door, what would happen after I walked into Chateau Ghetto, just from that NFC tag.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
It's pretty slick.
Yeah. And honestly, the NFCs is kicking off again, I think, with the new stuff that you're able to do in like Siri shortcuts and home automation. So, yeah.
All of the smart tech of today.
The smart tech of today. Interesting. Well, folks, I think we have come to the end of another episode of Tech News Weekly. I hope you enjoyed this very special episode.
I did.
I did too. Yeah. The fire episode of Tech News Weekly. Tech News Weekly publishes every Thursday, usually at twit.tv/TNW. That's where you can go to subscribe to the show in audio and video formats and check out the different places you can download it.
You can be a part of the show by emailing us at tnw@twit.tv and follow us all on the social medias with the tag @twit. And if you feel like shooting me a tweet, go ahead. I am ant_Pruitt on Twitter.
And I'm at Mikah Sargent on pretty much all of the social medias. Thanks to our TD, our editor, our studio engineer, our awesome people, John and Jeff and Jerry. No, not Jerry.
No,
sorry,
not
Jerry.
Jerry.
We love you, Jerry, but no. And of course, we will see you next time on Tech News Weekly, when things may or may not return to normal. We'll see. We did it, folks.
We didn't screw it up.